Hey guys, tonight we are going to dive headfirst into the grim reality of medieval life, specifically the bottom of the barrel. Imagine waking up, not in your cozy bed with your memory foam mattress and strategically placed pillows, but on a cold, cobblestone street. You're wearing rags, your stomach is screaming, and the last thing you remember is nothing. Congratulations, you're a beggar in the Middle Ages. And listen, before you start thinking you'd be all Robin Hood-y and charming, let me just stop you right there. You probably won't survive this. Disease, starvation, and random acts of violence are your new best friends. Forget your avocado toast and Netflix binges. Your new diet consists of whatever scraps you can find before someone else does, and entertainment is dodging horse manure. Speaking of diets, apparently some medieval cookbooks actually suggested using sawdust as a thickening agent in soups. I mean, talk about roughage. It makes kale smoothies sound like a gourmet treat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Don't want to force anyone into enjoying tales of simulated misery. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Maybe you're listening at dawn in Tokyo, or having a midnight snack in Madrid. Wherever you are, I hope you're more comfortable than you're about to be. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awake with a jolt. The rough cobblestones dig into your cheek. Disoriented, you try to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washes over you. Your head throbs, and your stomach churns with a gnawing emptiness. You're lying in a dark alley, the stench of refuse and stale ale heavy in the air. Your clothes, or rather, the rags clinging to your skin, are filthy and threadbare. A chilling wind whips through the narrow passage, raising goosebumps on your exposed arms. Where are you? What happened? Panic starts to set in. You pat your pockets, searching for any familiar object, any clue to your identity. Nothing. They're empty. You have absolutely nothing. The only thing you have is an intense feeling of hunger and dread. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you can make out the rough stone walls of the buildings looming overhead. The air is thick with the sounds of a bustling city, the clatter of carts, the shouts of vendors, the bleating of livestock. It's a chaotic symphony, utterly foreign and overwhelming. This isn't anywhere you recognize. You stumble to your feet, your legs weak and unsteady. You lean against the wall for support, trying to gather your bearings. You notice a group of figures huddled around a flickering fire at the end of the alley. They are as ragged and wretched as you are, their faces gaunt and lined with hardship. Are they beggars? Suddenly, a gruff voice breaks through your daze. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Another mouth to feed, eh? One of the figures, a man with a scarred face and missing teeth, steps forward. His eyes are hard and suspicious. Who are you? And what are you doing in our territory? Territory? You try to speak, but your throat is dry and scratchy. I don't know, you manage to croak out. I don't remember anything. The man scoffs. Amnesia, hey? That's a new one. Usually they just claim to be down on their luck. He eyes you up and down, assessing your worth. All right, newbie. Welcome to the bottom. Now, let's see if you've got anything worth trading for a crust of bread. You look down at your tattered clothes, your empty hands. You have nothing to offer. You're completely and utterly destitute. This is your new reality. You are a beggar, alone and lost in a world that seems determined to crush you. The Middle Ages were not known for their social safety nets or their helpful tourist information centers. You are on your own. Good luck. You'll need it. Historians still argue whether the lives of the poor were universally terrible, or if some communities offered genuine support, but right now, support seems a long way off. The scarred man, whose name you later learn is Borin, doesn't waste any time in demonstrating the brutal realities of your new existence. Come on, he says, grabbing your arm with surprising strength. You'll learn quick enough. Survival's a harsh teacher. He leads you out of the alley and into the teeming streets. The sights, sounds, and smells are overwhelming. Merchants hawk their wares, children dart through the crowds, and animals jostle for space. The air is thick with the odors of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and animal waste. It's a sensory assault, and you struggle to keep from gagging. Borin pushes you towards a busy marketplace. Watch and learn, he instructs. This is where we make our living. Begging, thieving, whatever it takes to survive. He demonstrates a variety of techniques. He feigns a limp, wailing about a non-existent injury. He approaches wealthy-looking merchants, pleading for alms in a pitiful voice. He even tries to snatch a loaf of bread from an unguarded stall, but is caught by the baker and receives a swift kick in the rear for his trouble. You quickly realize that begging is a competitive business. Other beggars are vying for the same scraps, and the merchants are often hardened and unsympathetic. Many simply ignore you, while others hurl insults or even threats. As the day wears on, your stomach growls louder and louder. You haven't eaten anything since you woke up, and the hunger is becoming unbearable. You try your hand at begging, but your attempts are clumsy and ineffective. You lack the practiced desperation of the seasoned beggars. People just walk past you, their faces averted. Finally, as dusk begins to settle, Borin takes pity on you. He shares a small piece of stale bread that he's managed to acquire. It's hard and dry, but you devour it gratefully. It's the best thing you've ever tasted. Not enough to fill a sparrow, Borin says, but it'll keep you going for a while. He points to a dark corner of the marketplace. We sleep there. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. You spend the night huddled in the corner, shivering in the cold. Sleep is fitful and disturbed by the sounds of the city. You dream of food, of warmth, of a life that seems impossibly distant. The next day is even harder. The hunger is constant, and the competition for scraps is even fiercer. You try everything Borin taught you, but you still struggle to get by. You manage to collect a few coins, but it's not enough to buy a decent meal. That evening, Borin leads you to a hidden alleyway. Tonight, he says, we eat like kings. He pulls out a string of dead rats. You stare at them in horror. Rats, you stammer. You can't be serious. Borin shrugs. What choice do we have? It's better than starving. He explains that they catch the rats in the sewers and roast them over a small fire. It's not exactly fine dining, he admits, but it's protein. You're repulsed by the idea, but the hunger is overwhelming. You close your eyes and take a bite. It's greasy and gamey, and the taste lingers in your mouth long after you swallow. But it's also filling. You eat the rat with grim determination, reminding yourself that you have to survive. You have to find a way to escape this nightmare. Even if it means eating rats. After all, people ate all sorts of things during times of famine. Ergot poisoning from tainted rye, for example, was a relatively common problem in some regions. It caused hallucinations and convulsions, and some historians believe it may have even contributed to the Salem witch trial centuries later. Now that's a bad meal. Historians still argue whether rat consumption was a common practice among the very poor, or an extreme measure taken only in the direst circumstances, but either way, you're doing it. After a few days of scavenging and rat eating, you begin to adapt to your new reality. You're still hungry, you're still cold, and you're still repulsed by the things you have to do to survive, but you're also starting to learn the ropes. Borin introduces you to the other members of their little group. There's Ilara, a young woman who's surprisingly adept at pickpocketing, Old Man Fitzwilliam, who claims to have once been a scholar, and Marta, a mute girl who communicates through gestures and drawings. They are a motley crew, bound together by their shared poverty and desperation. They share their meager resources, watch out for each other, and offer what little comfort they can. You begin to feel a sense of camaraderie, a feeling of belonging that you haven't experienced since, well, you can't remember when. Borin explains that they are part of a larger organization, a beggars' guild that operates throughout the city. The guild provides protection, shares information, and enforces its own code of conduct. We look after our own, Borin says. But we also punish those who break the rules. He explains that the guild has a strict hierarchy, with different levels of membership and different responsibilities. At the bottom are the newcomers, like you, who are expected to learn the ropes and follow orders. At the top are the leaders, who make the decisions and control the flow of resources. The guild has its own secret language, a complex system of gestures and slang that allows members to communicate without being understood by outsiders. You begin to learn the language, practicing the signs and memorizing the code words. You also learn about the different territories in the city, each controlled by a different gang of beggars. There are constant skirmishes and turf wars as the gangs compete for the best begging spots and the most lucrative scams. One day, Borin takes you to a hidden meeting place, a dilapidated cellar beneath an abandoned building. The cellar is filled with beggars, all huddled together in the dim light. A man with a booming voice stands at the front of the room, addressing the crowd. Brothers and sisters, he booms. We face a new threat. The city guard has been cracking down on vagrancy, arresting our members and throwing them in the dungeons. We must stand together and resist their oppression. The crowd roars its approval. The man continues, outlining a plan to disrupt the city guard's patrols and make it more difficult for them to arrest beggars. He calls for volunteers to participate in the plan. Borin nudges you. This is your chance to prove yourself, he whispers. Show them you're one of us. You hesitate. You're not sure you want to get involved in a potentially dangerous confrontation with the city guard. But you also know that you need to earn the trust of the guild if you want to survive. You take a deep breath and raise your hand. I'll volunteer, you say, your voice trembling slightly. The man at the front of the room smiles. Good, he says. We need all the help we can get. Welcome to the fight. Life in the Beggars Guild is hard, but it's also a little bit better than being completely alone. You have a sense of purpose, a feeling of belonging. You're still a beggar, but you're no longer just a nameless face in the crowd. You're part of something bigger, something that gives you a reason to keep fighting. And surprisingly, you find out that guilds, in various forms, weren't only for beggars. In fact, medieval guilds were quite common. They regulated everything from craftsmanship to trade, ensuring quality and protecting the interests of their members. Who knew? Historians still argue whether these guilds were ultimately beneficial to the overall economy, or if they stifled innovation and competition, but you are now experiencing the bottom-rung version. Your involvement with the Beggars Guild deepens as you learn more about their methods and their motivations. You discover that begging is not just about asking for handouts, it's a complex art form that requires skill, cunning, and a deep understanding of human psychology. Borin teaches you the finer points of deception. You have to play a role, he explains. People are more likely to give if they feel sorry for you, or if they think you're entertaining. He shows you how to feign a disability, how to craft a believable sob story, and how to use your body language to elicit sympathy. You practice your act in front of a mirror, perfecting your pitiful expression and your trembling voice. Ilara teaches you the art of pickpocketing. It's all about speed and misdirection, she says. You have to be quick and nimble, and you have to distract your target. She shows you how to use sleight of hand to lift purses and wallets without being noticed. You practice your technique on unsuspecting passers-by, starting with small objects and gradually working your way up to larger targets. Old Man Fitzwilliam, despite his frail appearance, possesses a wealth of knowledge about the city and its inhabitants. He knows the best places to beg, the most generous merchants, and the most gullible targets. He also has a knack for spotting potential danger, warning you about approaching city guards and rival gangs. Marta, the mute girl, has a unique talent for street performance. She can juggle, dance, and perform acrobatic feats that draw crowds and earn coins. You learn to assist her in her performances, playing music on a makeshift instrument and collecting the donations. Together, you and your fellow guild members explore every avenue for survival, from feigning illness to staging elaborate theatrical performances. You become masters of disguise, able to transform yourselves into a variety of characters, from crippled veterans to orphan children. One day, you come across a particularly lucrative opportunity. A wealthy merchant is hosting a grand feast at his mansion, and the streets are lined with beggars hoping to receive some scraps from the leftovers. Borin hatches a plan to infiltrate the feast. We'll disguise ourselves as servants, he says. We'll sneak in, grab whatever we can, and slip out unnoticed. You and Ilara dress up in stolen servants' clothes, while Borin and Old Man Fitzwilliam pretend to be wealthy guests. Marta remains outside, acting as a lookout. You manage to get inside the mansion without being detected. The feast is a lavish affair, with tables laden with food and drink. The guests are dressed in fine clothes and jewels, and they seem oblivious to the poverty and suffering outside. You and Ilara circulate among the guests, offering to refill their drinks and clear their plates. As you do so, you discreetly pocket scraps of food and silverware. Borin and Old Man Fitzwilliam mingle with the guests, engaging them in conversation and distracting them from your activities. Everything is going according to plan until a suspicious guard notices your nervous behavior. He approaches you and demands to know who you are and what you're doing. You freeze, unsure of what to say. The guard eyes you suspiciously, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Just when you think you're about to be exposed, Marta appears out of nowhere and creates a diversion. She starts juggling flaming torches, drawing the attention of the guests and the guards. In the chaos, you and Ilara slip away unnoticed. You escape the mansion with your pockets full of stolen goods. You meet up with Borin, Old Man Fitzwilliam, and Marta, and you celebrate your successful heist with a feast of your own. Stealing, of course, was illegal, and punishments were severe. But some laws were downright bizarre. For example, in some medieval towns, it was illegal to own a pig without a ring in its nose. Apparently, pigs were notorious for causing damage to property. And speaking of property, did you know that manure rights were a real thing? Farmers could actually sell the rights to collect manure from their fields. Historians still argue whether such local laws and customs were effective in maintaining order and fairness, or whether they were simply arbitrary and oppressive, but either way, you're glad you just stole some silverware and not a pig without a ring. Amidst the daily struggle for survival, you occasionally hear whispers of hope, stories of the church's charity and its commitment to helping the poor. The church, after all, was a powerful institution in the Middle Ages, owning vast amounts of land and wielding considerable influence over the lives of the people. It was also supposed to be a beacon of compassion and generosity. Driven by desperation, you decide to seek aid from the local parish. You've heard tales of monks and priests providing food, shelter, and medical care to those in need. Maybe, just maybe, you can find some respite from the harsh realities of your life. You approach the imposing stone church with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The grand architecture and the stained glass windows stand in stark contrast to the squalor and poverty of the streets outside. You feel out of place, unworthy of entering such a sacred space. Hesitantly, you enter the church and approach the altar. A robed priest is leading a service, his voice echoing through the vast hall. You wait patiently until the service is over, then approach the priest with humility. "Father," you say, your voice barely above a whisper. "I am a poor beggar, in desperate need of help. I have no food, no shelter, and no means to support myself." The priest looks down at you with a mixture of pity and suspicion. He sizes you up, assessing your sincerity. "Have you sought work?" he asks. "Have you tried to find honest employment?" You explain that you have tried, but that no one is willing to hire you. You're too weak, too dirty, and too unskilled. The priest sighs. "The church has a duty to help the needy," he says. "But we cannot simply give handouts to everyone who asks. We must ensure that our charity is not being abused." He offers you a small loaf of bread and directs you to the church's soup kitchen, where you can receive a bowl of thin broth. He also promises to pray for your soul. You gratefully accept the bread and the broth, but you can't help feeling disappointed. You had hoped for more: a warm bed, a change of clothes, perhaps even a chance to learn a trade. But all you received was a meager meal and a pious platitude. As you leave the church, you observe other beggars seeking help. Some are turned away, while others are given small amounts of food or money. You notice that the priest seems to favor those who are elderly, disabled, or visibly devout. You also witness instances of hypocrisy and corruption. You see wealthy merchants donating large sums of money to the church, not out of genuine piety, but in order to gain favor and influence. You hear rumors of priests and monks hoarding food and wine for themselves, while the poor starve outside the church gates. You realize that the church, like any other institution, is flawed and imperfect. It is capable of great acts of charity, but it is also susceptible to greed, corruption, and prejudice. Despite your disappointment, you continue to seek help from the church, hoping to find some small measure of relief from your suffering. You attend services, offer prayers, and try to present yourself as a worthy recipient of God's grace. But you also begin to question your faith. You wonder why God allows so much suffering to exist in the world. You wonder why the church, which claims to be God's representative on earth, often seems indifferent to the plight of the poor. The church wasn't just about spiritual matters, it also played a significant role in education and preserving knowledge. Monasteries, in particular, were centers of learning, where monks copied and preserved ancient texts. Of course, some monks were more interested in brewing. beer than in studying scripture, but that's another story. The question of the church's role is still debated today. Historians still argue whether the church was a force for progress and enlightenment, or whether it was an obstacle to scientific advancement and social reform. But for you, right now, it's mainly a place that sometimes has soup. Life on the streets is not just about hunger and cold, it's also about constant fear. Fear of disease, fear of violence, and, perhaps most of all, fear of the law. The city guard is always on the lookout for vagrants and beggars, and they are not known for their compassion. You quickly learn to avoid the guard whenever possible. You stick to the shadows, hide in alleys, and blend in with the crowds. You also learn to recognize the signs of an impending raid, the sound of approaching footsteps, the glint of armor in the sunlight, the nervous glances of other beggars. One day, as you're begging near the marketplace, you spot a group of city guards approaching. You immediately duck into a nearby alley, hoping to avoid their attention. But it's too late. One of the guards spots you and orders you to stop. "Halt, in the name of the king," he shouts. You are under arrest for vagrancy. You try to run, but the guard is faster. He tackles you to the ground and handcuffs your wrists. You struggle and protest, but it's no use. The guard drags you away, ignoring your pleas for mercy. You're taken to the city jail, a dark and dingy dungeon beneath the town hall. The jail is overcrowded with prisoners, most of whom are accused of petty crimes like theft and public intoxication. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, urine, and despair. You're thrown into a cell with several other beggars. They are a hardened bunch, accustomed to the harsh realities of prison life. They tell you stories of beatings, starvation, and disease. They warn you to keep your head down and avoid attracting the attention of the guards. The jail is a brutal and unforgiving place. The guards are cruel and arbitrary, dispensing punishment without mercy. Food is scarce and inedible. Disease is rampant, and many prisoners die from illness and neglect. You spend several days in the jail, enduring the harsh conditions and the constant fear. You long for the relative freedom of the streets, even with all its dangers and hardships. Finally, your case comes before the magistrate. You're brought into a courtroom, where you're accused of vagrancy and begging. The magistrate is a stern and unyielding man, with no sympathy for the poor and downtrodden. You try to explain your situation, telling the magistrate that you have no family, no home, and no means to support yourself. You plead for mercy, promising to leave the city and never return. But the magistrate is unmoved. He declares you guilty and sentences you to a week in the stocks, a public form of punishment where you're locked in a wooden frame and subjected to ridicule and abuse. You're led to the town square and placed in the stocks. The crowd jeers and throws rotten vegetables at you. You endure the humiliation and the discomfort, reminding yourself that it could be worse. You could be sentenced to flogging, branding, or even execution. After a week in the stocks, you're finally released. You're weak, hungry, and humiliated, but you're also grateful to be alive. You limp away from the town square, vowing to be more careful in the future. The justice system in the Middle Ages was often arbitrary and cruel. Punishments were harsh and often disproportionate to the crime. And if you were poor, you were far more likely to be convicted, regardless of your guilt or innocence. The concept of innocent until proven guilty was not exactly a guiding principle. For example, did you know that trial by ordeal was a common practice? If you were accused of a crime, you might be forced to carry a red-hot iron or plunge your hand into boiling water. If your wounds healed cleanly, you were considered innocent. Otherwise, well, you were probably guilty. Historians still argue whether these harsh punishments were effective in deterring crime, or whether they simply perpetuated a cycle of violence and oppression, but either way, you're glad you just got a week in the stocks. As autumn fades and winter descends, the already harsh conditions of your life become almost unbearable. The days grow shorter, the nights grow longer, and the temperature plummets. The wind howls through the narrow streets, carrying with it a biting chill that penetrates your threadbare clothes. Finding food becomes even more difficult. The markets are less crowded, and the merchants are less generous. Scraps are scarce, and competition for them is fierce. You spend hours each day searching for something to eat, often coming up empty-handed. Shelter is also a major problem. The alleys and doorways that you once relied on for protection offer little respite from the cold. You huddle together with your fellow beggars, sharing body heat and trying to conserve what little warmth you have. The lack of food and shelter weakens your immune system, making you more susceptible to disease. Coughs and colds are rampant, and many beggars succumb to pneumonia and other respiratory illnesses. One by one, your companions begin to fall ill. Old man Fitzwilliam develops a hacking cough and a high fever. He grows weaker and weaker, until finally, one morning, he doesn't wake up. Ilara contracts a skin infection that spreads rapidly across her body. She cries out in pain, begging for help, but there's nothing you can do. Even Borin, the strongest and most resilient of your group, begins to show signs of wear and tear. He becomes more withdrawn and irritable, and his cough grows steadily worse. You yourself are not immune to the effects of the winter. You feel constantly tired and weak, and your skin is dry and cracked. You develop a persistent cough that racks your body with pain. The winter seems to drag on forever. Each day is a struggle for survival, a desperate battle against the elements. You lose all sense of time, and the world shrinks to the confines of your immediate surroundings. One day, you hear rumors of a nearby monastery that is offering shelter and food to the poor. You decide to make the journey, hoping to find some relief from the cold and hunger. The monastery is located several miles outside the city, and the journey is arduous. You trudge through snow-covered fields and icy forests, battling the wind and the cold. You're weak and exhausted, and you stumble several times along the way. Finally, you reach the monastery. It's a large and imposing structure, surrounded by high walls and a deep moat. You approach the gate and knock hesitantly. A monk answers the door and eyes you suspiciously. You explain your situation, telling him that you're a poor beggar in desperate need of help. The monk hesitates for a moment, then nods. "We have limited resources," he says. "But we will do what we can." He leads you inside the monastery and takes you to a warm and dry room. He offers you a bowl of hot soup and a blanket. You gratefully accept the food and the warmth, feeling a sense of relief that you haven't experienced in months. The monastery provides you with shelter and food for several weeks. You help with chores around the monastery, cleaning, cooking, and tending to the animals. You regain your strength and your health, and you begin to feel a glimmer of hope for the future. Winter in the Middle Ages was a truly terrifying time. Famine was a constant threat, and the cold claimed countless lives. There were even wolf months, when packs of wolves, driven by hunger, would venture into villages and attack people. Talk about a bad hair day. Heating technology was also pretty primitive. Most people relied on open fires for warmth, which were smoky, inefficient, and dangerous. And of course, the Little Ice Age, a period of colder temperatures that began in the 14th century, only made things worse. Historians still argue about the exact causes and consequences of the Little Ice Age, but there's no doubt that it had a significant impact on medieval society. But for you, trapped in this simulated history, the key thing is that you survived. As the worst of the winter begins to recede, and the first hints of spring appear, a new rumor begins to circulate among the beggars and the downtrodden. Whispers of a royal pardon, a chance for redemption, a way out of the squalor and misery that have defined your existence. The story goes that the king, moved by the suffering of his people, is planning to issue a decree offering amnesty to certain criminals and granting land and opportunities to the poor. The details are vague and uncertain, but the hope it inspires is palpable. You hear the rumors from other beggars, from merchants, and even from the city guards. Some dismiss them as mere fantasies, wishful thinking fueled by desperation. Others cling to them with unwavering faith, convinced that this is their chance to escape their miserable lives. Borin, ever the pragmatist, is skeptical. Don't get your hopes up, he warns. Kings don't care about beggars. It's just another way to keep us in line, to stop us from causing trouble. But even he can't deny the allure of the rumors. The thought of a better life, a life free from hunger, cold, and fear, is too tempting to ignore. You find yourself drawn to the rumors, despite your own reservations. You've seen firsthand the cruelty and indifference of the world, but you also believe in the possibility of change. You believe that even a beggar can dream of a better future. You start to investigate the rumors, seeking out anyone who might have reliable information. You talk to the town crier, the local priest, and even a few minor officials. You piece together fragments of information, trying to discern the truth from the lies and exaggerations. You learn that the king is indeed planning to issue a decree, but the details are still being debated. Some advisors are urging him to offer a generous pardon, while others are arguing for a more limited amnesty. The king himself is said to be torn between compassion and political expediency. You also learn that there are certain conditions that must be met in order to qualify for the pardon. You must be a resident of the city, you must have committed only minor crimes, and you must be willing to swear an oath of loyalty to the king. You meet these conditions, but you know that many other beggars do not. Some are recent arrivals to the city, others have committed serious crimes, and still others are unwilling to submit to the authority of the king. You realize that the royal pardon is not a guaranteed escape from poverty. It's a gamble, a chance that may or may not pay off. But you also realize that it's the only chance you have. You decide to take the risk. You resolve to do everything in your power to qualify for the pardon and to seize the opportunity for a better life. You start to clean yourself up, to dress in the best rags you can find, and to practice your manners. You also start to attend church regularly, hoping to impress the priest and demonstrate your piety. The idea of a royal pardon wasn't entirely far-fetched. Medieval monarchs often used pardons as a way to maintain order and to reward loyalty. Sometimes, pardons were even sold for profit, which, you know, undermines the whole idea of justice. And speaking of the king, did you know that some medieval monarchs believed they had the power to heal people with their touch? This was known as the royal touch, and it was believed to be effective against a variety of ailments, especially scrofula, a form of tuberculosis. Historians still argue whether this belief was a genuine expression of faith or simply a cynical attempt to enhance royal authority, but either way, it shows how much power the king wielded. And hopefully, he'll use some of that power to issue your pardon. With the possibility of a royal pardon hanging in the air, you begin to formulate a plan, a risky gamble that could either catapult you out of beggary or leave you even worse off than before. You decide that simply waiting for the king's decree is not enough, you need to actively seek his attention to demonstrate your worthiness and your loyalty. But how does a beggar gain the attention of a king? The court is a world of its own, a swirling vortex of nobles, advisors, and sycophants, all vying for the king's favor. Navigating this treacherous landscape seems impossible, but you are determined to try. You start by gathering information. You listen to rumors, eavesdrop on conversations, and seek out anyone who might have connections to the court. You learn that the king is currently residing in the city's grand castle, preparing for a series of important meetings and ceremonies. You also learn that the king is known for his love of entertainment. He enjoys music, dancing, and theatrical performances. He is also said to have a soft spot for underdogs, for those who have overcome adversity. Armed with this knowledge, you devise a plan. You decide to stage a performance in front of the castle gates, hoping to catch the king's eye and demonstrate your talent and your resilience. You enlist the help of your fellow beggars. Ilara agrees to use her pickpocketing skills to gather coins for costumes and props. Borin, despite his skepticism, lends his booming voice to the performance. Marta, with her acrobatic skills, is the star of the show. You spend days rehearsing your performance. You create a simple play that tells the story of a poor beggar who rises above his circumstances through hard work and determination. You incorporate music, dancing, and acrobatics to make the performance as entertaining as possible. Finally, the day arrives. You and your fellow beggars gather in front of the castle gates, ready to perform. A crowd begins to gather, drawn by the music and the commotion. As you begin your performance, you feel a surge of adrenaline. You pour your heart and soul into your role, determined to impress the king and the crowd. Marta's acrobatics are breathtaking, Borin's voice resonates with power, and Ilara's mischievous antics draw laughter from the audience. The performance goes smoothly, and the crowd is captivated. But there's no sign of the king. You start to lose hope, wondering if your efforts have been in vain. Just as you're about to finish the performance, a trumpet blast sounds from the castle walls. A royal herald appears on the balcony and announces that the king has heard of your performance and wishes to see you in person. You and your fellow beggars are led inside the castle, through a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. You're awestruck by the opulence and grandeur of the castle, a stark contrast to the squalor and poverty of the streets outside. You're brought before the king, who is seated on his throne, surrounded by his advisors and courtiers. He smiles kindly at you and asks you to tell him your story. You recount your tale of hardship and resilience, of your struggles to survive on the streets, and of your determination to make a better life for yourself. The king listens intently, his eyes filled with compassion. Medieval courts were notoriously treacherous places. Intrigue, backstabbing, and power struggles were commonplace. Courtiers often used flattery and deception to gain the king's favor, and those who fell out of favor could quickly find themselves in exile or even worse. For example, the concept of courtly love was all the rage. This involved elaborate rituals of courtship, where knights would profess their undying devotion to noble ladies. Of course, it was often just a game, a way to gain social status and influence. Historians still argue whether courtly love was a genuine expression of romantic feeling, or simply a sophisticated form of social manipulation, but for you, it's just another obstacle between you and the king's attention. Standing before the king, you feel a mix of hope and trepidation. This is the moment of truth, the culmination of your efforts. Will the king be moved by your story, or will he dismiss you as just another beggar? Will he grant you the pardon you so desperately desire, or will he condemn you to a life of poverty and despair? The king listens intently as you recount your journey, your voice trembling slightly as you describe the hardships you have endured. You speak of hunger, cold, and fear, of the constant struggle to survive on the streets. You also speak of your determination to make a better life for yourself, of your willingness to work hard and to contribute to society. When you finish speaking, the king remains silent for a moment, his gaze fixed upon you. The silence seems to stretch on forever, each second filled with anticipation and uncertainty. Finally, the king speaks. His voice is calm and measured, but his words carry the weight of royal authority. "I have heard your story," he says, "and I am moved by your resilience and your determination." A wave of relief washes over you. It seems that your efforts have not been in vain. But the king's words are not yet a guarantee of pardon. However, the king continues, "I must also consider the needs of my kingdom. I cannot simply grant pardons to everyone who asks. I must ensure that those who receive my mercy are truly deserving." He turns to his advisors and consults with them in hushed tones. You watch anxiously, trying to decipher their expressions and their gestures. Are they arguing in your favor, or are they trying to convince the king to reject your plea? After a few minutes, the king turns back to you. "I have decided to grant you a trial," he says. "I will give you an opportunity to prove your worthiness and your loyalty." He explains that he is planning to embark on a royal progress, a journey through the kingdom to assess the needs of his people and to administer justice. He invites you to accompany him on this journey, to serve as his personal attendant and to assist him in his duties. You are overjoyed by this unexpected opportunity. It's more than you could have hoped for. You gratefully accept the king's offer, vowing to serve him with all your heart and soul. The king's decision is met with mixed reactions from his advisors. Some applaud his wisdom and his compassion, while others express concerns about the risks of trusting a former beggar. One advisor, a stern and ambitious nobleman, steps forward and addresses the king. "Your Majesty," he says, "I must respectfully object to this decision. It is unwise to place such trust in a person of low birth and questionable character. He may be a spy, a traitor, or simply an incompetent fool." The king silences him with a wave of his hand. "I have made my decision," he says, "and I will not be swayed by your doubts. I believe in the power of redemption, and I am willing to give this young man a chance to prove himself." You are grateful for the king's support, but you also realize that you have made a powerful enemy. The nobleman clearly distrusts you, and he will likely be looking for any opportunity to undermine you and to discredit you in the eyes of the king. You know that you must be careful, that you must prove your worthiness at every turn. Your future depends on it. The concept of divine right of kings was a common belief in the Middle Ages. This held that monarchs derived their authority from God, and that they were therefore accountable to no one but God. Challenging the king's authority was seen as a sin, and could lead to severe consequences. Of course, this didn't stop people from plotting against kings all the time. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they say. Did you know that some medieval kings even had professional food tasters? These individuals were employed to sample the king's food and drink before he did, to make sure it wasn't poisoned. Talk about a stressful job. Historians still argue whether the divine right of kings was a genuine expression of religious belief, or simply a convenient way for monarchs to justify their power, but either way, it's clear that the king holds all the cards here. As you embark on the royal progress, serving as the king's attendant, you begin to witness firsthand the complexities and intrigues of the court. You quickly realize that the king's inner circle is not a harmonious group of advisors, but rather a collection of ambitious individuals, each vying for power and influence. You observe their interactions with the king, their subtle manipulations, and their hidden agendas. You learn to read their body language, to interpret their veiled comments, and to discern the truth behind their carefully constructed facades. One day, as you are assisting the king with his correspondence, you stumble upon a disturbing piece of information. A letter, seemingly misdelivered, reveals a secret plot against the king, a conspiracy to overthrow him and replace him with a puppet ruler. The letter is unsigned, but it contains enough details to suggest that the plot is real and that it involves several high-ranking members of the court. You are shocked and horrified by this discovery. The king, who has shown you such kindness and trust, is in grave danger. You are torn between your loyalty to the king and your fear of the consequences. Exposing the plot could put your own life at risk, as the conspirators are powerful and ruthless. But remaining silent would be a betrayal of the king's trust and could lead to his downfall. You decide that you must act. You cannot stand by and watch as the king is betrayed and overthrown. You resolve to gather more evidence, to identify the conspirators, and to expose their plot to the king. You begin to investigate discreetly, using your position as the king's attendant to gain access to information and to observe the actions of the suspected conspirators. You listen to their conversations, scrutinize their movements, and search for any clues that might confirm their involvement in the plot. You soon discover that the leader of the conspiracy is none other than the stern and ambitious nobleman who had objected to your presence at court. He is a cunning and ruthless man, driven by a thirst for power. He has been secretly plotting against the king for years, gathering support from disgruntled nobles and foreign powers. You also discover that several other members of the court are involved in the plot, including a powerful bishop, a wealthy merchant, and a trusted advisor to the king. They are all motivated by different reasons, but they are united in their desire to overthrow the king and to seize power for themselves. As you gather more evidence, you realize the magnitude of the conspiracy. It is not just a simple plot to replace the king, it is a wide-ranging plan to destabilize the kingdom, to incite rebellion, and to plunge the country into chaos. You know that you must act quickly, before the conspirators can put their plan into motion. But you also know that you must be careful. Exposing the plot prematurely could alert the conspirators and allow them to escape justice. You decide to confide in Borin, your former companion from the streets. You trust him implicitly, and you know that he will do everything in his power to help you. Borin is shocked by your discovery, but he is also determined to assist you. He agrees to use his contacts in the city's underworld to gather more information about the conspirators and to monitor their movements. Medieval conspiracies were often elaborate and dangerous affairs. They could involve complex networks of spies, secret meetings, and coded messages. The consequences of being caught could be severe, ranging from imprisonment and torture to execution. One famous example is the Pazzi conspiracy, a plot to assassinate Lorenzo de' Medici and his brother Giuliano in Renaissance Florence. The plot failed, and the Pazzi family was brutally punished. Did you know that some medieval kings even employed professional assassins? These individuals were skilled in the art of disguise and deception, and they were often used to eliminate political enemies. Talk about a dirty job! Historians still argue whether conspiracies played a significant role in shaping medieval history, or whether they were simply isolated incidents that had little long-term impact, but either way, you are now right in the middle of one. Knowing the stakes, you transform from a former beggar into a cunning informant, navigating the treacherous currents of the royal court with a newfound sense of purpose. The weight of the king's safety rests on your shoulders, and you embrace the role, albeit with a constant undercurrent of fear. You continue to serve as the king's attendant, all the while gathering more evidence about the conspiracy. You shadow the suspected conspirators, eavesdrop on their conversations, and scrutinize their every move. You are careful to avoid arousing their suspicion, knowing that any misstep could expose you and jeopardize the entire operation. Borin, with his network of contacts in the city's underworld, provides you with invaluable intelligence. He learns about secret meetings, coded messages, and hidden caches of weapons. He also identifies potential allies within the court, individuals who are loyal to the king and who can be trusted to assist you. You confide in a few trusted members of the court, revealing the existence of the conspiracy and sharing the evidence you have gathered. They are shocked by your discovery, but they are also determined to help you protect the king. Together, you and your allies devise a plan to expose the conspiracy and to bring the conspirators to justice. You decide to gather all the evidence you have collected and to present it to the king in a dramatic confrontation. You choose a time when the conspirators are all gathered together, attending a royal banquet. You know that this is a risky move, as it could give the conspirators an opportunity to strike first. But you also know that it is the best chance to expose their plot and to prevent them from carrying out their plans. As the banquet begins, you feel a knot of anxiety in your stomach. You know that you are walking into a dangerous situation, but you are determined to see it through. You wait for the right moment, when the king is surrounded by his advisors and courtiers. Then, you step forward and address the king in a loud and clear voice. Your Majesty, you say, I have uncovered a conspiracy against your throne. Several members of this court are plotting to overthrow you and to replace you with a puppet ruler. A gasp of shock and disbelief sweeps through the room. The king stares at you in stunned silence, his eyes wide with surprise. The stern and ambitious nobleman, the leader of the conspiracy, steps forward and denounces you as a liar and a traitor. He accuses you of fabricating the evidence in order to gain favor with the king. You calmly present the evidence you have gathered, revealing the details of the conspiracy and identifying the conspirators. You show the letter you discovered, the coded messages you intercepted, and the hidden caches of weapons you uncovered. The king listens intently, his expression growing increasingly grim. He turns to the suspected conspirators and demands an explanation. The conspirators deny the charges, claiming that they are victims of a malicious plot. They attempt to discredit you, questioning your motives and your credibility. But the evidence is overwhelming. One by one, the conspirators begin to crack under the pressure. Some confess their involvement in the plot, while others attempt to flee the scene. The city watch, alerted by your allies, rushes into the banquet hall and arrests the conspirators. The king, finally realizing the extent of the betrayal, is filled with rage and grief. The role of informants was crucial in medieval society, particularly in uncovering plots and conspiracies. Informants were often rewarded handsomely for their services, but they also faced the risk of being exposed and punished by those they betrayed. The concept of treason was taken very seriously in the Middle Ages, and those found guilty of treason could face horrific punishments, such as being drawn and quartered. This involved being dragged through the streets, hanged, disemboweled, and then cut into 4 pieces. Talk about a bad day at the office. Historians still argue whether the use of informants was a necessary evil in maintaining order and stability, or whether it simply created a climate of fear and suspicion, but either way, you are using those tactics to survive. With the conspirators exposed and arrested, a tense calm descends upon the court. The initial shock gives way to a mixture of relief, anger, and suspicion. The king, though grateful for your intervention, is deeply shaken by the betrayal of those he trusted. The moment of truth has arrived, and the consequences of your actions are about to unfold. The trial of the conspirators is swift and decisive. The evidence against them is overwhelming, and they are quickly found guilty of treason. The king, seeking to make an example of them, orders them to be executed in a public spectacle. The executions take place in the town square, before a large crowd of onlookers. The conspirators are paraded through the streets, jeered and spat upon by the populace. They are then brought to the execution block, where their heads are severed from their bodies. The stern and ambitious nobleman, the leader of the conspiracy, is the last to be executed. As he kneels before the block, he glares at you with hatred and curses. Your name. Even in his final moments, he refuses to admit his guilt or to express remorse for his actions. With the conspirators eliminated, the king turns his attention to rewarding those who help to expose the plot. He bestows honors and titles upon your allies, recognizing their loyalty and their courage. But the greatest reward is reserved for you. The king, deeply grateful for your service, offers you a choice of rewards. He offers you wealth, land, and a high position in the court. You are tempted by these offers, but you also realize that they come with a price. Accepting them would mean abandoning your old life, your friends, and your values. It would mean becoming a part of the very system that you once despised. You ask the king for time to consider his offer. You want to weigh the pros and cons, to decide what is truly best for you. As you contemplate your decision, you are approached by Borin. He congratulates you on your success, but he also expresses concern about your future. Don't forget where you came from, he warns. Don't let power and wealth corrupt you. Stay true to yourself, and remember the people who helped you along the way. His words resonate with you. You realize that he is right. You cannot abandon your past, no matter how tempting the future may be. You return to the king and express your gratitude for his generosity. But you decline his offer of wealth and power. You explain that you are not suited for a life of luxury and privilege. You prefer to remain true to your roots, to continue to help those in need. The king is surprised by your decision, but he respects your honesty and your integrity. He grants you a lesser reward, a small plot of land outside the city and a modest sum of money. He also promises to support your efforts to help the poor and the downtrodden. But betrayal was a constant threat in the Middle Ages, even among friends and family. The lure of power, wealth, or revenge could often lead people to betray those closest to them. One famous example is the story of Brutus, who betrayed Julius Caesar in ancient Rome. Though not technically medieval, the story was well known and often cited as an example of the dangers of betrayal. And speaking of executions, did you know that some medieval executioners were considered celebrities? They were often skilled in the art of their craft, and they attracted large crowds to their performances. Talk about a morbid form of entertainment. Historians still argue whether the public nature of medieval executions was intended to deter crime, or whether it simply reflected a society that was more accepting of violence. But for you, the key thing is that you survived the conspiracy and emerged with your integrity intact. Having navigated the treacherous waters of courtly intrigue and emerged victorious, you find yourself at a crossroads. You are no longer the nameless beggar who woke up in a dark alley, stripped of everything. You have proven your worth, uncovered a conspiracy, and earned the respect of the king. But what does the future hold? You accept the king's offer of a small plot of land and a modest sum of money. It's enough to provide you with a comfortable living, but it's not enough to make you wealthy or powerful. That's fine with you. You decide to use your newfound resources to help the poor and the downtrodden. You build a small shelter for the homeless, a place where they can find food, warmth, and companionship. You also establish a soup kitchen, providing free meals to those who cannot afford to feed themselves. You enlist the help of Borin, Ilara, and Marta, your former companions from the streets. They are eager to assist you, and they bring their unique skills and talents to the task. Borin uses his connections in the city's underworld to identify those who are most in need of help. Ilara uses her pickpocketing skills to acquire food and supplies for the shelter. Marta uses her acrobatic skills to entertain the residents of the shelter and to raise money for its upkeep. Together, you and your friends create a haven for the poor and the marginalized, a place where they can find dignity, respect, and a sense of belonging. You also use your influence with the king to advocate for reforms that will benefit the poor. You urge him to lower taxes, to create jobs, and to provide better services for the needy. The king listens to your advice, and he implements some of your suggestions. But he also faces resistance from powerful nobles and wealthy merchants who are unwilling to sacrifice their own interests for the sake of the poor. You realize that change is slow and difficult, but you are determined to continue fighting for justice and equality. You know that you cannot solve all the problems of the world, but you can make a difference in the lives of those around you. As you reflect on your journey, you are filled with a sense of gratitude and humility. You are grateful for the opportunities you have been given, and you are humbled by the challenges you have overcome. You realize that your experience as a beggar has changed you in profound ways. It has taught you the value of compassion, the importance of resilience, and the power of hope. You are no longer the same person you were when you woke up in that dark alley. You have become something more, something better. You have become a beacon of light in a dark and troubled world. The idea of social mobility was rare, but not impossible, in the Middle Ages. While most people were born into a particular social class and remained there for their entire lives, there were exceptions. Some individuals were able to rise through the ranks through hard work, talent, or good fortune. For example, some peasants were able to become successful merchants or craftsmen, while some soldiers were able to rise to positions of power and influence. But social mobility was the exception, not the rule. Did you know that some medieval towns had laws that restricted the clothing that people could wear, based on their social class? These laws, known as sumptuary laws, were intended to maintain social distinctions and to prevent people from dressing above their station. Talk about fashion police. Historians still argue whether social mobility was a positive or a negative force in medieval society, but for you, the important thing is that you managed to defy the odds and to create a better life for yourself. Years pass. The small plot of land you received from the king blossoms into a thriving community, a testament to your unwavering dedication and the collective spirit of those you helped. The shelter for the homeless expands, offering not just food and warmth, but also education and skills training, empowering its residents to rebuild their lives. The king, remembering your wisdom and integrity, continues to seek your counsel on matters of justice and social welfare. Your influence grows, but you never forget your humble beginnings, always advocating for the marginalized and the forgotten. The memory of the conspiracy fades into the past, a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the importance of vigilance. You have learned to trust cautiously, to value loyalty, and to never underestimate the capacity for both good and evil in human nature. Borin, Ilara, and Marta remain your steadfast companions, their loyalty unwavering. Together, you form a close-knit family, bound by shared experiences and a common purpose. You never fully escape the shadow of your past. The memory of waking up as a beggar, forced to eat rats to survive, remains etched in your mind. It serves as a constant reminder of the depths of human suffering and the importance of compassion. But you no longer dwell on the pain and the hardship. You have transformed your suffering into a source of strength, a catalyst for change. You have used your experience to create a better world for others. As you grow older, you reflect on your life with a sense of peace and fulfillment. You have faced adversity, overcome challenges, and made a lasting contribution to society. You have lived a life of purpose, a life of meaning. You know that your time on this earth is limited, but you are not afraid. You have faith that your legacy will endure, that your work will continue to inspire others long after you are gone. You close your eyes and you drift off to sleep, surrounded by the love and gratitude of those whose lives you have touched. You dream of a world where poverty and suffering are no more, a world where everyone has the opportunity to live a life of dignity and purpose. You wake up in a warm bed, the sun streaming through the window. You are no longer a beggar, but you are also no longer the same person you were before. You have been transformed by your experience, and you will never forget the lessons you have learned.